Hey there, it's Zac Nelson here with the Nelson team, and I am joined with Chad Miller, owner of Horizon Home Inspections. Chad, I'd like to introduce you, and please tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, Chad here. I'm a home inspector. I've been inspecting homes since 2001, and a lot of the questions I get about why did I get into the business in the beginning, just to give you a highlight on that. I actually got into the business because I had my home inspected by a home inspector, and he went through the house. It was a pretty small house. It took him about 3 hours to do the inspection, and ultimately what the net effect was is he came back with an inspection report that was handwritten on a piece of paper. It was faxed over back in 2001. You can imagine that was a little more of a thing they did, but he faxed it over, and I couldn't really read his handwriting. And also on top of that, he got my house mixed up with somebody else's. So yeah, it wasn't a good thing. And so he said, hey, we got water in the crawl space, and that's a pretty big thing when you think about moisture at the base of your house. So obviously I was concerned, and I wanted to get it corrected. And so I called him and tried to get some information from him about where this water was, and he would not really give me a whole lot of information, and said he stood by his report. And I prompted him again, and I said, hey, I don't have a crawl space, so would you please tell me where it's at? And in the end, again, he was mixing my house up with somebody else's house because I didn't have a crawl space, didn't have water in there. So the little light bulb went off, and I thought, boy, there just has to be a better way to do this. So I quit my job, and not my wife wasn't too happy about that, but we made it through. Quit my job, went out, got certified, trained with a home inspector on site for 6 months, and then started my own company with the off-the-shelf program that essentially would give you pictures and descriptions, and I would enter all the information on site at the inspection, so I wouldn't have to kind of make the same mistakes he did, where you couldn't read my handwriting. I had pictures to prove stuff, and it was all digital, so we could read everything. It was done on site. I wouldn't have to try to remember it when I got home. So, and in the end, that's kind of how we got started. And since then, we've grown the business from doing 3 or 4 inspections a week to actually last week we ended up doing 29 inspections with the crew I have now. So I love my job, and it's kind of a good feeling to help people out.
No doubt, I can relate to that. And it's interesting. We never know what how our calling in life is going to come to us. And yours, that's like a bolt of lightning, really. It sounds like.
Yeah, it really was. It was an interesting feeling, and I've never been one to kind of take risks like that. But I thought there has to be a better way to do this for people and get them a good product and stand behind what you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Well, for everybody out there, Chad has been our inspector for the last several years, our go-to, and we trust him. He does an amazing job. Extremely thorough, and we can't speak highly enough of Chad and his team. So we have a few things, a few questions to ask you here, Chad, just for everybody to better understand, the home inspection process and why it's important. So first question, it's a basic one, but for those who have never purchased a home before, how important really is a home inspection?
It's very important, and here I'll give you a few examples why. Think of a home inspector as your family doctor. You make regular visits to your family doctor to go in and just make sure things are good. And when you're buying a home, it's a pretty big investment. Ultimately, it wants to be your home and the place where your family grows and experiences things, but you want to make sure you protect your investment. It's very important to have us come in and give it a good physical. We're going to go top to bottom. There's over 300 different things that we'll comment on, whether they need improvement or they're satisfactory. We'll make those things for you, and we'll also create a list for you that's most important to least important. So that way, when you get the home inspection report, you can actually understand, where should I start today, and maybe some things I can do later. But it's very important to get that physical done, because you just never know. The process that you may go through is going to be different than a home inspector. And so getting a home inspection done is something you're doing to protect your investment, and hopefully you can move in and enjoy what you're buying.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the term that you use, giving the home a physical. I think that's something that we can all relate to. And so that really helps, I think, to understand, the importance of it.
Right.
So in a general home inspection, Chad, what are, just if you can give high level, what are some of the things that you guys look for?
Yeah, so kind of the major things which kind of are things that could cost a lot of money if there's some issues with them. We'll look at the roof, we'll look at structure, we'll look at electrical, we'll look at plumbing, obviously your HVAC, your heating and cooling systems in the house, your hot water tank. Those are kind of the highlights, and those are the ones that we have a process as we go through to make sure that we're kind of working those things. The hot water tank, we're getting it nice and hot. We got the AC running well in the beginning of the inspection, and then we turn it off to let it kind of warm up to room temperature so we can do the furnace. So there's several things that we do to kind of go through that process. And again, those are the highlights, but we'll flush toilets, we'll run sinks, we'll make sure the stoppers are working, we'll open and close doors. That's also another way to check for structure. Same thing with windows. But it's, again, about 300 different items that we'll make comment on. And again, it's a certain process that we use to make sure that we can kind of capture things that you ordinarily wouldn't if you just went to one room or went in a different direction.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and I know. I love how your reports are structured. They're very easy to read. Now, a question about with the actual home buyer. Should the home buyer be present at a home inspection?
Yeah, I think, in today's environment with the COVID stay-at-home restrictions and things and limiting the number of people, we do want the buyer to attend at some point. And a lot of times we ask them to attend towards the end because we can give them a little bit of a recap. That kind of lets us get through and get some of the things taken care of. And we'll cover those highlighted or those larger items I just mentioned with them so they get a feel and they can actually see things. Now, once this is cleared up and prior to this COVID, virus situation we have, we want people to be there. It's kind of back to what I originally started with as to why I started this business. It's about an education, and we want people to be there to see things, see how they work, ask questions, and by all means know what they're buying and how to take care of it. When you get a report, sometimes it can be a little overwhelming looking at all this stuff. So we try to talk through that with them. So when they do get the report, they're like, oh yeah, I remember talking about that, and it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Now, when you do the inspection, typically how quick is your turnaround on getting the report to a buyer?
Yeah, we typically get the report out within 24 hours. It's important to us to kind of make sure we do that. One, because we want to make sure everybody's getting the information soon, that they can have time to process a little bit of it and then get the report so they can keep that in mind that, oh yeah, that's what we talked about. We also want to just keep things fresh and make sure that if if a realtor is up against deadlines, that we're making sure we're helping hitting those too. So 24 hours is typically as long as we would take to get those out.
And yeah, I know we appreciate that about you guys, having that turnaround so quickly, because a lot of times those deadlines they're time sensitive. So that's always helpful. So Chad, radon gas is something that is obviously talked about in Colorado an awful lot. In the last handful of years, I seem to, anytime I turn on the radio, I hear a scary ad about radon gas. So tell us why buyers should get a radon test completed at a house.
Well, I think there's really two reasons at this point. Some people have different opinions on what the radon level should be. And we go by the EPA guideline, which is 4.0, and that's picocuries per liter. So 4.0 and higher, you're supposed to have a radon mitigation system installed. So in Colorado, we are on the red scale for radon, which means every house in Colorado has it. The question is just how much. And long-term effects are like cigarette smoking. It's a carcinogen, so it could affect you differently than it affects me. But we want to make sure that if it's a concern, that we get it addressed and we have that tested. So when that radon gas kind of finds its way through the earth and into your house, we take care of it if we need to. So that's one time to do it, is at the beginning, to just say, hey, I've got a health concern with this. Let's get it tested. Also keep in mind that when you go to sell your house, the next person might be health conscious about radon gas and want it tested then. So my opinion is, let's get it all addressed up front, and that way you don't have to worry about that down the road.
That's right. Yeah, and the good thing is it's something that can be addressed. I think there's some misconception out there that radon gas, if it's in a house, well, then the house is contaminated or there's something bad about the house. But there are systems that can be installed, relatively, low cost in all, all consideration. But there are things, it can be remediated. And another thing is, a question for you is how, what percentage would you say of homes that you test high for radon gas?
Yeah, so that's a good question for, if it's a house with a basement, normally we have a basement house comes out at about 80%, roughly 80% of those homes come out over 4.
80%. Wow.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of depends on the environment, how close we are to the mountains, how close we are to the plains. That number changes. Crawl spaces, that's about half that. 40% of them come out high if there's just a crawl space, and then you even drop that number again if you just have slab on grade with no crawl space below. So
sure.
But every house we test, like I said, does have some radon. And it seems like the further we get out towards the airport, not nearly as rich of minerals in the soil. So we have a lower radon. But the average in Colorado, I believe now, is right around 7.8.
7.8. So it's nearly double what the EPA average, what they say is safe.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fascinating. That's really, I had not heard the numbers of 80% of homes with basements. So
yeah, that's kind of what our experience is. And again, sometimes the environment can affect that on high windy days. The air compresses the ground outside and pushes more inside, and it kind of has a reverse effect when you have too much water. So, but we just kind of run those tests for 48 hours. So we kind of take out some of those wind and environmental elements. We take it out. Plus that's about the time the house would take to refresh. So by the time that air comes into your house, 48 hours later, that air would escape. So that's kind of the refresh cycle we want to test.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that, Chad.
Yeah.
So next question I have for you is, do you recommend a buyer have a home inspection done on a new construction home? I'm thinking as a buyer, well, the house is new. What could go wrong with it? So what is your take as a professional on that?
Yeah, I do think you should. And it kind of, the way we put it again is that you still want to have a physical done on your investment. The one thing that we do find with new builds is, there's a lot of different things that go into that in terms of where in the process the builder is and how often they get it inspected by the county inspectors. And the one difference between the county guys and us is there's some differences, and we're going to go through and test everything, where they're going to test a sample number of things. So that's kind of one of the big differences there. Most of the time they might test a sample of 5 houses and sign off on all 5 when they check miscellaneous things in 3 or 4 of them, and they kind of go with the rule of, hey, everything's good, so everything should be signed off. So sometimes that happens, and again, mistakes get made and people miss things. So I was in a house not too long ago and got up in the attic space. They were closing, I think, in 2 days, and there was no insulation in the house at all. So
oh my gosh,
things can get overlooked even though they've been checked off. So I do think
and big things. Big things too. Well, I mean, Chad, you did an inspection for me recently on a new construction home in Castle Rock. And we also had the sewer scope done. And you had found an issue with a crack in the foundation, and they ended up having to excavate down, and that's something that may not have been caught.
Yeah.
So that was done to fill that crack, and then also with the sewer scope, the importance of a sewer scope on new construction. They had actually laid when they laid the sewer line, they laid it on top of rocks and large rocks and boulders, and it caused the line to push in. And if had the client's not done a sewer scope, they wouldn't have known. And maybe a year or 2 from now, that sewer line would have burst.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a prime example of why home inspection and a sewer scope are so important on new construction homes. Yeah,
and we find defects with sewer scopes. We also find a lot of debris in new builds. For example, gloves, cans, 2x4s. So it's good to get that stuff out now.
No question about that. So Chad, just curious, you've done a lot of inspections for us, and I've followed you on social as well, and seeing you, post some of your interesting pictures from inspections. Tell us the craziest, or a couple of crazy things or 2 that you've seen at a home inspection.
Yeah, sure. I guess probably maybe the scariest one was a house that I had gone into, and it was in a pretty much in a field. It was surrounded by 30 acres, and the people that owned the house needed to leave. They needed to get back home for a family emergency, which was outside of the country. And anyway, they left the house, and then they decided, we're going to stay where we are, and we're going to sell our house. So unfortunately, that meant there was a lot of food and a lot of stuff in this house that pests and rodents could be, just free for all. So I got into the house, and ultimately I got into the crawl space. And as soon as I crawled into the crawl space, I hear the hissing sound of a snake. And I'm usually really good about looking, and this time for some reason I didn't. But I got in there, and I pretty much levitated and kind of flew out and got back on the ground. And I looked in there, and there was about an 8-foot bull snake in there.
Oh my gosh!
And obviously
that's terrifying.
It's not something that was going to come after me, but nevertheless, pretty darn scary. So that was probably the scariest one, and that was not the only one. There were several in there. So
Wow.
that was the only one I
Wow.
could see.
Well, you literally risk your life for your clients. I mean,
Yeah, I do.
I'll tell you that.
Right? Yeah, and I always, it's funny when I see the funny things that go on. One time I saw somebody actually used a car jack to jack up the foundation of their house, and things like that, or a hammer stuck underneath a piece of wood to kind of support it. One time I got into an attic space of an old house, and there was an orange jumpsuit up there, so I was kind of wondering where the person was that had the jumpsuit. So.
Yeah, long gone, I guess.
Yeah, those are kind of fun and scary things, but I see a lot of them, and it's more the funny stuff or crazy stuff for the homeowner repairs. Those are the ones that kind of get me, giggling sometimes.
Yeah, DIY. Like I watched it on YouTube, special kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and you see it, and I know they have all great intentions, but it's kind of funny how they just kind of give up after a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Well, hey, Chad, thanks for stopping by today and taking part in our interview with an expert segment here. We really appreciate your time and your helping our clients and so many other people around the Denver metro area. So, if anybody wants to get a hold of Chad, his information will be here. So Chad, again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. I really appreciate it, and good luck out there.
Yeah, thanks. You the same. We'll see you soon.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.